The 2014 Ford Focus has a pretty loud hissing sound from the brake area, which I'll let you guys listen to. As you can hear, when you step on the brakes, the sound disappears. When your foot is off of the brakes, it's going pretty constantly. It also is throwing a check engine light with a code of P0171. If you've got that going on, or you have, I think it's a PO300, which is just a multiple cylinder misfire. 071 is a engine running too lean. It's possibly an issue with the brake booster. So in the sense of the sound coming through without pressing on the brakes, it's possibly an issue with the piston. If it's continuously going as you press down on your brakes, it could just be something else in the brake booster. So we're going to try to replace that. I don't have any instructions for this particular vehicle, so it's going to be kind of a, figuring out as I go type of a thing. So if I do anything improperly, just leave it down in the comments. We'll try to learn all together, but hopefully this is helpful for someone, because like I said, there wasn't any videos that I could find to help out with the repair, so hopefully this can help y'all. So a little step by step there. For the first step, just going to be nice and simple. We're just going to remove the battery, because we're trying to get to the brake booster, which is right back here. Little in the way. I was thinking about removing the cowl, but going to try to leave it in if I can. If not, then we'll get to that road when we cross it. But yeah, battery first. So in order to remove the battery terminal, you do have to take out the air box as well. So just, be prepared for that. It took a little longer than expected because the bolts were rusted pretty bad. So I had to go and get some bolt extractors and then use some wedges and whatnot or punches, to get it out. But now we've got room to get to our brake booster. And before we do anything else, I'm going to just prime the system, I think, or maybe that's the wrong word for it, but pretty much just pump the brakes a couple times to get the pressures where we want them to be. And once I've done that, I'm going to just take out some of the fluid with a turkey baster from the fill cap here, from the reservoir. And then I'm going to try to see if I can just loosen the master cylinder right here and just take that off without having to worry about these brake lines, which might not be possible. But I'll keep you guys updated, let you know what happens. But the plan is to drain the fluid from here after priming it, to then undo these bolts that I see here to try to get the master cylinder off. Obviously get the electrical connection off here too, and then see if we can just move this out of the way and then get started on removing the brake booster. If the master cylinder doesn't work out as nicely as that, then we gotta just come over here and just loosen the brake lines right here. I think it's usually a 10 millimeter. Don't quote me, haven't gotten there yet. I'll update you guys. But I'm also hoping that I can get the booster out without having to do anything with the brake lines for the ABS system right there as well. So we'll see. All right, so we were able to get the brake lines loosened, and it's actually going to be a 15 millimeter spanner wrench or tubing wrench, or whatever you want to call it, flare nut wrench. That's what I was using, not a sponsor, just what I used. But it's a 15. And just so you know, the flare wrench only goes on in like one certain way, it seems like. So if it feels like it doesn't fit, just keep trying. It'll probably get there, at least if the 2014 Focus is already working on the 15, it's gonna fit. But just make sure you put like some towels down or something too, because you don't want the brake fluid that will start dripping out of those to go anywhere. You want to just make sure that gets contained. That stuff is super gnarly. You don't want it on any of your paints or on anything really, because it's pretty corrosive and super toxic. So make sure you kind of keep track of that. But yeah, now we're going to just move on to taking these bolts off, which I believe those were 13 millimeters. I kind of already started trying to get one of them off, but those are 13 millimeters. And once those are off, now that we have these brake lines disconnected, this master cylinder will just come out, hopefully fingers crossed. And then we can go on to working on getting the actual brake booster out. We need to see this, but I feel like having a little bit of extra reach right now is going a long way. So I've got the bolt on the right already undone, but it's probably like a 2-foot extension for the ratchet here. But this is helpful because there's not really room to move it over there. I'm gonna install those tubes. No, that's it. So I'm beginning to learn that this is going to take a little longer because now I have to replace the brake master cylinder as well. So if you guys see that little wet spot right there underneath the brake booster housing, that's some brake fluid that was leaking through this rubber gasket on the master cylinder. So you can see where it's wet towards the bottom of the gasket. That's where it was touching that wet spot you see there. And so what that means is there's just some kind of leak or some kind of a passage of that fluid getting to where it's not supposed to. This gasket's supposed to prevent that from going into there. So since we've got that going on, we do need to replace this as well, because if we don't, then it's just going to be kind of the same thing, because the brake fluid gets into the brake booster and it just deteriorates the diaphragm in there, which can lead to all kinds of pressure related issues, which is what we're currently experiencing right now. So it's going to be a little longer, but I'm just going to go ahead and get this switched out and kind of continue on. And also Cal, I'm just leaving on. I realized if I take this off, there's actually just a metal plate that extends to pretty much as far as that goes out anyway. So there's no real benefit to removing the Cal for this. Didn't mention that earlier. Figured to mention it now. To show you where I just was. Just crawl underneath here. There's a brake pedal. And then there is, oh gosh, there's that oh so familiar sight, just to make it clear. In advance for this next section, because this is going to be a pain to see, but the next step for us is going to be to remove these 4 bolts. I promise there's 4 of them, just kind of hard to show them. And right now, just to kind of solve this mystery, I'm underneath, I'm like in the car right now, just laying on the floor in the driver's side. This is the brake pedal that I'm pressing, so you just kind of crawl down here. But undo those 4 bolts, and I think they're 13 millimeter, so you just need a deep socket because those screws are pretty long. Realistically, it's probably a 1/2 inch, but 13 millimeter also works. But I also need to disconnect the, sorry guys, disconnect that little light bluish thing that you can see there. It's like a little pin that's going through. I promise there's something there. It's like this little pin, I think I can see it, that's going through the back part of this brake booster. And there's also going to be a little clip that I have to remove at the top of that pin. I would point out where it is, but I honestly can't see the screen of my phone right now, so hopefully I can point to it with post-production if it's there. But there's a little clip that you have to undo there too. I'll link a video that shows how to just do this in general to just like another car, as well as some of the other things I didn't show you guys how to do, like get the battery box out and all that stuff. I just didn't show that because there's already videos that do a better job than what I do, which I'll link those all in the description. Just realized since all of the brake fluid is, or since the whole brake line is no longer pressurized, I can just press this pedal really easy and just get it to the floor and show you guys. Oopsie. Sorry about that. Trying to give you guys a seizure. Show you guys the full length of that pin. So somewhere along there should be like this little cotter pin type thing, I suppose, that should have to come out before I could just remove it. The next step will be for me to find it and then do a very confusing job explaining it to y'all. Alright, so scratch what I said about the metal cylinder with a cotter pin. Ford decided to put in a plastic piece with like a metal core that has barbs on the end. So you guys can see the barbs there. So those barbs stick through where that brake booster comes into the inside of the car. And in order to get it out, you have to push in on these pins while you then push out on the other side here. So it took me about 30 minutes to get this out, to be honest with you. I had to kind of figure out some stuff and try to jury rig some things. What I ended up doing is I had the brake with no pressure on it at all, so I wasn't touching it, because it seems like when you do push down on it, it's a little harder to turn. Seems like there's a little bit of pressure on it. So no pressure at all on the brake. I used one hand to squeeze these tabs in, while I used the other hand to position a wrench right at, this little top end right here. And as I squeezed in those tabs, I pushed with the wrench. That was able to get it out of the way far enough so these tabs were clear from their anchoring spot, and then I was able to just push it all the way out pull it all the way out, I guess, with my hand on the other side. So hopefully that saves you guys some trouble. So just, as I drop it. So just push in these tabs and then just push it out with a wrench. And just, be careful when you're removing this, because it is just a plastic piece. So you don't want to pry on it too hard. I say as I drop it, but that's fine. It's robust for that, but just don't pry on it too hard. You can break it if you're like really grabbing it with pliers or twisting it or anything like that. So just be careful. Also, one more thing I want to bring up in regards to this piece. If you have a hard time actually pushing these tabs in because you feel like they're pressed up against the metal backing that they're going to be next to, just take this and just push it in this way. So like push from the top, so this flat piece of what would look like the washer is up against its housing metal. That way you can relieve the pressure from these points here. Once you do that, it should be easier to squeeze these down, because sometimes if this gets pushed as you're jostling with it, these little barbs, I guess, will get pushed up against that piece of metal that's on the other side, and it'll make it a little tough to push them in because they got pressure on them. All right, so once you get that charming piece from out of there, the next thing left to do, which I got a little excited and just did it already, is just to get, oh gosh, those 4 bolts. There's 1, 2, 3, and then, fourth one is where you'd expect it to be, right there. Just get those cracked loose. They're honestly not incredibly tight on there. Feel like they're snugged and then some. But you need a 13 millimeter for that. I'd recommend a deep socket, just because those bolts are kind of long that they're fastened to, or those bolts are just threaded onto a long post. I used kind of a longer wrench with a flexible head, but to be honest with you, I think a stubby would probably be in your best interest to use here. I did struggle quite a bit. Having a shorter wrench would probably be a little easier. That being said, I didn't use a shorter wrench, so maybe you'll start using one and realize it's not the move. But if I could, I would have liked to try a shorter wrench. But yeah, it's a 13 millimeter deep socket. Also, I did disconnect this little connector from the accelerator pedal, just because it was in the way of that top right bolt up there. I'd point to it, but the space here. Right. So the brake booster is loose now. Like that will have no problem coming out. The issue though is that these brake lines, they kind of in the way. And I mean, these things aren't the most flexible. They're literally just hollow pieces of steel or whatever other metal they're made out of. And they're just connected to the ABS module right there. I think I'm going to try to disconnect these personally. I could probably try to make it work, but it'd be a little sketchy trying to move this out of there and leaving these in place. I think, I'm not a professional, so if you see this, it's all just for reference. If you decide you want to try to make it out without moving these, that's up to you. This isn't really my car either, so I'm just trying to be extra cautious with it. So I'm just gonna undo these 2 lines. It's just 2 of them. I don't have to undo all of those. Just undo those 2 lines, and then take this out. Also, don't remember to take out your little vacuum hose too. So we got it out, and the brake lines did in fact need to be persuaded. And for whatever reason, these are different sizes. Probably pretty standard, but I'm not used to this kind of work. So these are 13 millimeter instead of the, I think it was 15 for the other ones. So with the spacing that I had, very limited, hard to get any kind of a wrench in here and then turn, because we got that lovely bulge there. and then on the other side we have the other brake lines. So it's not fun, I will admit. This took, probably like an hour, hour and a half. But it is out. Probably gonna call it a night for now and then do the rest of this tomorrow. Also gonna try to see if I can find a different brake booster. Didn't realize I got another EverStart. Wanna see if I can trade that out for something else. Also, for that vacuum line, you just pretty much pull it straight out. It's just got some ribs in there. You don't have to twist it or turn it in any direction. It should just be able to pull out. You might want to grab some kind of a trim removal tool though, like I did, and just shove it up there in between where this little rubber piece is. There's a little bit of a rubber spot there, just in between that and where it sits, and start prying it up and then just pull it out. It's stuck in there pretty good, so you'd have to use some force. Just don't break the connection because it is plastic. If you tug on it too hard, it'll probably snap pretty easy. So just be careful, but you do need to put a lot of force into it. So installation is just opposite of removal, so just do what we did in reverse. I just got the brake booster back in there. Just got to pull this little tab out of it now, and then put my vacuum line in there. Oh, dropped it, it's fine. I put the vacuum line in there, and so, just plug it in. Just go straight in there. There we go. Like I said, it's kind of a nice solid fit. So it just goes straight in there. And then what I didn't mention earlier, in addition to the tool that I did show you guys that I used, I also use one of these, another trim removal tool, just to kind of get underneath it like this and then pull it up. Just like I said earlier, this plastic is pretty brittle. It's not like brittle, but you don't want to be tugging on it too hard, So just pry up underneath it with this as you're kind of pulling up on it once you've made some space with the other tool, and you should be good. I just lightly tied the brake lines back on, and they do move, but I think you have to remove all kinds of stuff to get them to swing out of the way far enough for this. But they do move, so just be aware of that if that's something that you want to go down. At least they do when they're loose. When I tighten them back up, maybe they won't. I'll update you. But yeah, just gonna bolt this back in from the other side. I've already put the retainer clip back down, and then we're good to go. So if you're also removing your master cylinder, you're going to need to, or if you're installing a new one, you're going to need to remove your old reservoir from the old cylinder and put the reservoir onto your new cylinder. To do that, there's I think it was a T25 Torx screw that was just in this little hole here. So this just kind of sits on there. You can't miss it. It's just, it's right on top. I'll show you when it's assembled again. But you just unscrew that, and then you just pull it straight up off of the cylinder, and then you just put your reservoir in your new one and you're good to go. It's a little bit of oomph, but it's nothing too crazy. Like just be careful, because I did spray some fluid when I pulled it out, so just make sure you're doing it in an area that's not going to get any splashback on the car itself, because like I said, this is pretty bad for paint. So if getting any of these brake lines is kind of a challenge for you, you just have to really line them up right. It's a lot easier said than done, but you might have to just get creative. These things have to be like perfectly square in those holes in order for those to work right. So if you're feeling like it's just not screwing in, you're not catching threads at all, just keep messing with the angles. Try tilting it up, tilting it down, tilting to the side, just moving it a little bit. Just do something. So now that the master cylinder and the brake booster are in there, we're just going to go ahead and put back in the battery tray and the battery and get the air box in, and then we should be ready to start bleeding the brakes, and then that should be good at that point. So if you had a hard time getting the bolts out for your battery holder, don't worry too much. The bolts are a little bit messy. This is the best looking bolt that I have from that process. It's the only one that I didn't have to get out with destructive means. The head is still good enough for a socket. It is pretty badly rusted, but the other two, they kind of just look like relics from the Civil War. And I had to use destructive means to get both of them off. This one was like a bolt extractor, and I think this one was a chisel with the hammer on it. You can see where it struck it. But yeah, I'm just gonna throw some anti-seize onto this bolt that I'm gonna put in. I'm not too worried about only having one in there. with pretty much like all of the older cars. These didn't even have these battery covers. The battery just sat in the engine bay hooked up. My Jeep's like that. My truck's like that. I think my truck has one of these braces over the top of it, but that's because it's a 4x4 meant to go off-road. I'm really not too worried about this car only having one of these bolts holding this tray on. Like I said, not super necessary to even have this. So I'm just going to do one. I'm going to put anti-seize on it and just hand thread it, just so we don't have any issues with removal in the future. Alright, so now that everything's put back together, we're just going to go and bleed the brakes. And so typically the order for that is going to be passenger rear, driver rear, passenger front, and then driver's front. You're typically going from the furthest wheel from the master cylinder, then kind of working your way up. Once we've bled all of those, I'm going to go and get a fancy scan tool, and then we're going to bleed the ABS system as well. Just since we did remove brake cables from the ABS module. So, I mean, at this point, the job that we worked on is done. It's just kind of doing the tidying up. I'll put links in the description to further details of how to do all of this type of stuff that I didn't cover. Hopefully this video was helpful. Best of luck.